Apple killed the Intel laptop in one afternoon in November 2020. Here is exactly how they did it. Chapter 1: 20 Years of Intel. To understand what Apple broke, you have to understand what Intel had built. From the mid-2000s through 2020, Intel was the foundation of the laptop industry. MacBooks used Intel. Premium Windows laptops used Intel. Business machines used Intel. The entire PC upgrade cycle moved around Intel's release schedule. And for a long time, it worked. Every few years, chips got faster, laptops got thinner, performance improved enough that buying a new machine felt justified. Intel was not just a supplier, Intel was the rhythm of the industry. But by the late 2000s, that rhythm had started to fall apart. Intel's manufacturing roadmap was slipping. Process node delays stacked up. Performance improvements became smaller, efficiency gains became harder to find, and laptops started showing the strain. Premium machines costing $1,500 or $2,000 ran hot. Fans spun constantly. Processors throttled under sustained workloads. The laptop would perform brilliantly for a short burst, then slow down because it could not control its own heat. That became normal. Reviewers measured it, users complained about it, manufacturers designed around it, and the entire industry treated it like the unavoidable cost of making thin laptops powerful. Apple looked at the same problem and reached a different conclusion. Maybe the issue was not the laptop. Maybe the issue was Intel. Chapter 2: The M1 Moment. In November 2020, Apple introduced the M1 chip and put it inside the MacBook Air. That detail matters. The Air was not supposed to be the performance machine. It was Apple's entry laptop. Thin, light, fanless, and historically compromised. The laptop you bought because you wanted a MacBook, but not the expensive one. Then the benchmarks arrived. The M1 MacBook Air was faster than the Intel MacBook Air it replaced. That was expected. But it was also faster than Intel MacBook Pros that cost significantly more. Faster than premium Windows laptops from Dell, HP, and Lenovo that had been sitting at the top of recommendation lists for years. It edited video. It compiled code. It ran creative software. It did all of it silently, without a fan, without getting hot, and without collapsing under sustained load. At first, people looked for the catch. There had to be one. Compatibility, real-world performance, some workload where the old Intel machines pulled ahead and restored the natural order. For most everyday users, that moment never came. The fanless entry-level MacBook had just embarrassed the premium Intel laptop category, and Intel had no immediate answer. Chapter 3: The Battery Story. This is where Apple did more than win a benchmark. Before Apple Silicon, using a laptop meant negotiating with battery life. You knew how long your machine usually lasted. You knew when to start looking for an outlet. You carried your charger because forgetting it could ruin your day. All-day battery life existed mostly as marketing language. Sometimes a laptop could do it under ideal conditions: low brightness, light browsing, no serious workload. But in real use, especially on thin Intel machines, the promise often fell apart. The M1 MacBook Air changed that. Apple claimed up to 18 hours. Reviewers were skeptical because laptop battery claims are usually fantasy. Then they tested it and found something strange. The real-world numbers were actually close enough to matter: 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. A full workday without thinking about the charger. That changed the emotional experience of using a laptop. Not the benchmark experience, the human one. You could leave the house, work for hours, come back, and still have battery left. The reason was architecture. Apple Silicon is built on ARM, the same broad family of processor architecture that made smartphones and tablets so power efficient. Intel's laptop chips were built on x86, the architecture that powered the PC industry for decades. x86 is powerful and deeply compatible, but in thin laptops, it had become increasingly difficult to make fast, cool, and efficient at the same time. Intel created x86 and spent decades defending it as the default foundation of personal computing. AMD also builds x86 chips, and many of them are excellent, but Intel was the company that set the direction of the laptop market for most of its modern history. Apple broke from that foundation completely, and the result was obvious to anyone using the machine. Intel laptop users managed battery. Apple Silicon users forgot battery anxiety existed. That is not a spec sheet difference. That is a different relationship with the computer. Chapter 4: Intel's Response. Intel did respond. And to be fair, some of the response was real. The 12th generation Intel chips, Alder Lake, brought a hybrid architecture with performance cores and efficiency cores. It was an obvious reaction to where the industry was going, and it delivered genuine improvements. Intel was trying to become more efficient without abandoning x86. But the problem was deeper than one generation. The 13th and 14th generation era brought performance gains, but also questions around power, thermals, and reliability, especially in high-performance parts. Intel later had to address instability issues affecting some processors with microcode updates and manufacturer guidance. For buyers, the details mattered less than the impression. Apple Silicon MacBooks felt calm, silent, predictable, efficient. Intel machines still often felt like they were fighting themselves. Powerful, yes, but hot, loud, and dependent on cooling systems working perfectly to maintain that power. That difference became hard to unsee. Chapter 5. The Industry Scramble. The most telling part is what the rest of the industry did next. Windows manufacturers did not simply defend Intel and move on. They started looking everywhere else. AMD gained serious ground with Ryzen laptops, offering strong performance and better efficiency than many comparable Intel machines. Suddenly, AMD was not just the cheaper alternative. In many laptops, it was the smarter one. Then Qualcomm entered the Windows laptop market properly with Snapdragon X chips built on ARM. The promise was obvious. Bring the Apple Silicon formula to Windows. Long battery life, cool operation, instant responsiveness. A laptop that behaves less like an old PC and more like a modern mobile device. The results have been mixed. Windows on ARM still has compatibility issues. Some apps run perfectly, some do not. Some performance claims hold up. Others depend heavily on the workload. But the direction is unmistakable. The Windows laptop industry is trying to recreate the thing Apple proved in 2020. Not because Apple made a nice MacBook, because Apple exposed the weakness in the foundation everyone else had been standing on. That is not competition as usual. That is a market trying to escape its own past. Chapter 6. What this means for you. Intel laptops are not going to disappear tomorrow. Intel still ships millions of chips. Windows laptops still dominate huge parts of the market. Businesses still buy them. Gamers still buy them. Plenty of Intel machines are fast, capable, and worth considering. But the standard has changed permanently. A good laptop is no longer just a laptop that performs well plugged in. It has to stay fast unplugged. It has to run cool. It has to last all day. It has to avoid sounding like a tiny vacuum cleaner under normal workloads. Apple reset that expectation in 2020. So if you are buying a thin and light Windows laptop now, Intel is no longer the automatic answer. AMD deserves serious attention. Qualcomm deserves attention if your apps work well on ARM. And Apple Silicon remains the cleanest example of what happens when the chip architecture is matched honestly to what most people actually need from a laptop. Intel built the laptop era. Apple ended the assumption that Intel's way was the only way. And every laptop release since has been living in the shadow of that moment. The Intel laptop did not lose because one benchmark went badly. It lost because Apple proved something more important. A laptop could be silent, fast, cool, and genuinely all day without feeling compromised. Once that became real, the old trade-offs stopped looking necessary and started looking outdated. Intel's biggest problem is not just AMD, Qualcomm, or Apple. It is the memory of what Apple proved was possible. And that memory is now the standard every laptop has to compete against. Speaking of Apple proving the industry wrong, the M1 and M2 MacBook Airs created another problem Apple still has not solved. They are so good that in 2026, they may still be better value than the newest models Apple is trying to sell you. That story is next.